Hello, and welcome up to the Black Magic Treehouse, the podcast where we review the children's horror books of our youth that sometimes creeped us out or sometimes just camped us out, if that's an expression. I'm trying to make a pun about campiness, and actual physical camp. Anyway, my name is Eric. This thing's off the rails already. That's what happens whenever Jose's not here. But instead, I have everybody's favorite Jose fill-in, especially my favorite Jose fill-in, my girlfriend. I think her name's pronounced Udunu. Hello.
Hello, it's me, Udunu, also known as Adana, the girlfriend.
Yeah, so today, I noticed, whenever I edit, I always notice that whenever the floor gets thrown to me, I always start off by saying yeah. And then I think when I'm recording, don't say yeah every time you start talking. And then I listen back as I'm editing and I'm going, oh, I still say yeah every time I start talking. So I guess that's just the way God made me. Maybe it will save my life one day. Ha ha ha. Anyway, today we are reviewing, I don't like saying Goosebumps knockoffs because I don't think it's particularly true most of the time. But, you know, when I say that, what I mean is children's chapter anthology books of the 90s that probably would not exist in the form they exist in if Goosebumps were not the juggernaut of publishing that it was at the time. And this entry is Heebie Jeebies number 2, Welcome to Camp Creeps. And there's something a little different about this book compared to our usual fare. I'm going to go ahead and read the teaser on the back and see if anybody can guess what maybe makes the demographic of this one a little bit altered. Welcome to Camp Creeps. 2 big city kids don't stand a ghost of a chance in this strange and spooky camp. Would you freak out if a spider jumped on your head? Or be scared if you were chased by a hungry wolf? Even worse, what if you were standing face to face with a phantom? That's only part of what happened to 2 kids from the big city who stumble upon a creepy and haunted abandoned campground in the latest Heebie-Jeebies adventure. Come join Heather and Todd on a fun-filled journey packed with thrills and surprises as they investigate a mysterious haunted camp, discover their father's own secret involvement, and realize God's all-powerful protection and love. So, yeah, that's an appropriate sound for our almighty Christ. Honey, my dear, my darling, do you want to tell people about the genesis, so to speak, of this particular episode idea? Vis-a-vis the...
I sure do. So I started listening to a podcast this week. And I'll tell you, I was a little jealous.
We don't want to give them free advertising.
I will plug them. They are the After Rapture Party podcast. And I'm so jealous because they got to an idea before I could of reading through all of the Left Behind Kids books. And I am so jealous and traumatized listening along with them. It's hilarious and so bad. If you're not familiar with the
books are so bad, not the podcast, I'm assuming is what you're...
Yes, the books. The books are so bad. The podcast is so funny. Couple of, deconstructed, maybe fully unconstructed former believers going through each of these books. And those books, I'll give you a brief synopsis, and then we'll get back to this one. Those books go through the apocalypse, but through the eyes of children, and it's written for children to really get the fear of the Lord in you young, to make sure that you check all the boxes and you're raptured up, and all your clothes are left behind. So anyway, I was.
Is that what the left behind refers to? Everybody's clothes?
The clothes of the saved And
I didn't know those books just starred like piles of clothes. Is like a Toy Story adventure of clothing? Just like, where did our masters go? Or I guess that would be more like Brave Little Toaster.
yes, the brave little toaster of clothing and heathens. Heathens and clothing left behind, and hearing aids and tooth implants. Anyway, yeah, so many things are left behind. Anyway, I freaking loved it.
I'm
And
assuming anybody with breast implants would not be raptured because of how sinful a decision.
absolutely not. They're left behind, so we do not see any breast implants or, lip injections left behind. Only hearing aids. Everyone has hearing aids. They're all left behind. Anyway, so when Eric invited me to be a guest on this podcast, I wanted to do one of these Jesus books. Jesus Goosebumps, not Goosebumps, copyright infringement books. And let me tell you, I did not read these as a kid, but I did read those Left Behind ones. But this was just so good. So good. Now, in true me fashion, let me just point out that the first paragraph does start out with a little bit of body shaming.
I made a note of that.
Oh, I thought you might.
Thinking of you as I read that.
Not in a body shaming me sort of way, but in that he knows that I hate body shaming.
In the sense that the only time it's ever come up on this podcast is because you took us to task for not noting it whenever it crops up in 90s books.
And here it is. First paragraph. My little brother Todd had just swiped my flashlight and run ahead before I could get it back. That he got away from me wasn't just annoying. It was amazing. Normally he moves like a barge with his thick ankles and pudgy frame. He's anything but fast. Later we do find out that Heather, the sister, is super skinny, and she's Heather the Feather, and she hates being called Heather the Feather or made fun of about her weight. But don't you worry, the Lord made her that way, and it comes in later to be life-saving that she is Heather the Feather.
Yeah, I don't recall if... There I go in. Yeah. I don't recall if Todd's pudginess ever saves him. I think he just kind of gets written out of the last act because the author was like, oh no, how do I make this fat kid have a special ability?
Yeah, his fatness never makes a comeback, because I was like, maybe it's not body shaming if they do bring it back to the Lord made you that way, and you can hide behind one single pillar from a phantom and it'll save your life. Spoiler alert. But in this case, poor Todd and his pudgy ankles, all he does is twist an ankle. It didn't save him from twisting an ankle. It did not cushion a fall. It did nothing for him. He's just fat, but faster than the average pudge kid. So anyway, here we go into this book.
Into this book we go. Heidi ho. Well, I was going to ask, did this fulfill your itch that came from the Left Behind podcast? Because reading this, I was surprised that it was pretty mild in terms of the proselytizing and also the biblical, NC-17 rated, but it's okay because it's moral. So we can show it to kids, It's pretty tame. It's about as tame as any given Goosebumps book. So I don't know if you felt shortchanged or not.
To be honest, I did feel a little shortchanged because, I was really hoping for a big come to Jesus moment. I was hoping for some, laying on of hands or something at the end. I was hoping for an altar call, life and death. I know you don't know what that is. I know. I'm sorry. But
You could tell us.
well, for those of you who don't know what an altar call is, this is my Southern Baptist voice, by the way. An altar call is where they pretty much say, would you like to invite the Lord Jesus into your heart as your Lord and Savior? And if you do, you have to come to the front and be prayed for. So that's the altar call. So anyway, there wasn't anything like that. It just kind of is like, throughout the story, Heather Heather the Feather is like, I just prayed that God would keep us safe, and he did. I prayed that we would know what direction to go in, but we still got lost, but it's okay. I prayed that the fire would be put out, and it was, spoiler alert. And it just kind of goes along that direction. So I'm still jealous of the gals, the folks that are reading the other book. I'm going to be honest. I wanted to have a little more oomph, a little more pizzazz.
When did the Left Behind books come out?
I don't actually know. I'm picturing my...
They're like pre or post 9/11?
In my mind, they're pre, because I feel like I was younger than that going to the Christian bookstore and buying them. And I feel like I'm picturing people going directly onto airplanes in them and the airplanes crashing. What is the year?
1995.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I was pretty young reading that.
Well, that brings up another question I was going to ask you, is because I was thinking about how, just my sort of overview of like, you're a religious person, so I want to bother you about it. I was curious. I thought maybe post 9/11, because that's when I heard of them. I didn't know about them until I was in high school, which was, like a month into high school is when 9/11 happened for me. I mean, for everybody, but I'm just saying not everybody was that exact age that I was. But I was curious if that had something to do with how extreme those books were. Was like, because it's like, oh, the devil is in the face of the smoke coming out of the towers before they collapsed, and like the great Satan of Islam or whatever is trying to take our nation down, and we have to like buckle in and be super Christian now. What I was thinking about was how the 90s was. I watched a documentary a while back called, I think it's called The Slime Years, but it's about like the origin story of Nickelodeon, which started in like the late 70s. And the woman whose name I can't remember, but who would rise up to become like the president of Nickelodeon and basically shape it into the network that kids of my generation knew it as. She ran it from, sometime in the 80s until like 97 or 98 or something. And then she jumped ship and went over to Disney. But she talked about how the origin of Nickelodeon was that they wanted it to be like, all of the children's programming on the air at that time was like edutainment. There had to be like some kind of moralistic value. There had to be some kind of educational value, like Mr. Rogers and I don't know, probably like Mr. Wizard. I don't know what was on in the 70s, but stuff that like it either had to educate a kid or like teach them some kind of lesson. And they were saying like, we want Nickelodeon to be just a place where kids can go and hang out and be kids and be silly and have fun and go on adventures without feeling like they're being lectured to all the time. And to me, I feel like that attitude kind of permeated the 90s in general, in terms of like Goosebumps was a really big series. Not that there weren't people protesting Goosebumps at the time and trying to get it banned from libraries, but I don't know, like I just feel like, but it's also because I didn't grow up in the same kind of community you grew up in. So I guess my question is, was there as pervasive an air of like extreme religious moralizing at the time, and were people freaking out because of things like Goosebumps and Nickelodeon saying it's okay to not give your kids a moral, and were they freaking out like, but you have to give the kids a moral or they'll grow up to be, I don't know, atheists or whatever. Maybe that's what happened to me. I don't know. What's your perspective on all that compared to, nowadays, which I don't know if it's gotten more pervasive or if I'm just paying attention to it more because I'm an adult who's seeing the effects of it, as it affects the country we're in.
that was a lot of questions. So one, I think for me growing up, everything was probably teaching something. And by something, I mean Jesus. I mean, I was homeschooled for a long time. So, I'm pretty sure there was probably Jesus in our math. And there was definitely Jesus in our science. And trying to learn some of that. There's definitely Jesus in our history and our American history. And, in our music. I wasn't allowed to listen to secular music. In our books and reading, I even if I wasn't specifically reading a Christian book, I was definitely reading a wholesome educational book, like the girl diary books about girls that were like settlers, or I don't remember what they were called. Something wholesome. So I think I'm answering your question with yes, every single thing had to do with something. We did watch some Nickelodeon and a lot of Disney. So I get, there were some points where we didn't have that. We did have friends that weren't allowed to watch TV though, period. They didn't have a TV in the house. So we were more secular than that. As far as now, I think there are still definitely those folks out there for sure. As you know, I've deconstructed a lot, so I'm not over there. I wouldn't call myself religious, even though comparatively speaking to you, you might call me that, but I don't like it. So, but yeah, I think that, everything had a bit of that in there. And these not 9/11, they're pre 9/11, but those Left Behind books were definitely in there. And what did you say? 95?
95.
I was in 5th grade or 5th or 6th grade, and really, number one, really into them, really afraid of them. And that was, in my whole life, like in times. So anyway, we can talk about this book. This nice, pleasant little
How do you know
Christian
I'm done
book.
with all my questions?
Oh, we can talk more about that. I'm just going to fully tag that other podcast in this, and then we'll just take over their thing.
Okay. But I guess what I'm wondering is, do you think there was as much of a moral panic, especially among the voter base? Because, I think like a lot of cishet white people, I didn't really think that much about how much influence I'm going to say extremely religious or like evangelical, like the far right religious people. I didn't think about how much sway they had over the voting polls until Donald Trump got elected. So I was already an adult by that point. Because I didn't like George W. Bush either. Sorry, Trump supporters, but also don't listen to this podcast. I don't care about you. But I like George W. Bush. To me, I never got, and again, this might have just been because I wasn't paying attention or was ignorant of this kind of thing. But I didn't like him and his politics, but I didn't feel like he was being pushed as maybe it's also just because I wasn't on Facebook at the time. Facebook is where I see pictures of, paintings of Donald Trump walking hand in hand with Jesus or whatever. So maybe that did exist and it just wasn't as prevalent or in my face as the Donald Trump supporters. Is that what you think is going on with me?
I think a little bit of both. I mean, definitely in any church I grew up with, politics were there. You're definitely praying for the Republican person because that's the chosen one of the time. Trump has made it scarier in my mind, but also at that time I was on that side, which is embarrassing to say, but it is what it is. So we all grow and we change. But so it's hard to look back and know exactly where the scary lines were, if they were as scary as they are now. I do think social media plays a huge part in it. But definitely churches, especially mega churches, which we didn't go to a lot of those, but so any church has always played a part in politics and trying to get their congregation to go a certain way. It's a huge part of why I don't do church.
Okay. Well, this is all related to the book, I promise. I think I was just trying to, because like I said, this book's religious factor is pretty mild. It's like 4 out of 10, in terms of how much it's pushing anything. And I guess I was just trying to construct a narrative in my mind of like how maybe religious people were not as concerned with pushing quite as hard in the 90s because they weren't feeling like America was under attack from all these various forces that are now kind of rearing their heads or being more visible. Like, like I said, like other religions, people practicing other religions in America or the LGBTQ community or whatever. But maybe that narrative is just a false one, and it's just my pure ignorance. And Rod Randall, who wrote these books, just wanted to write some nice, clean, wholesome fun that wasn't too evangelical. But we can stop talking about politics now. First thing I wanted to talk about was this cover. And look on our Instagram at, what's our podcast called? Black Magic Treehouse Pod, I think. Instagram. I was about to say at Teen Creeps Pod, which is not a podcast that I have anything to do with.
But they're good too.
Yeah. Definitely inspired the format of this podcast that I had to convince Jose to emulate. But this cover has like kind of the Tim Jacobus style fisheye lens, really warped perspective of a log house cabin in the middle of the forest with two evil orange eyes staring out from the darkness of the door frame. And there's the Phantom. I was going to say the titular Phantom, but I guess his name's not in the title. And he's like a green, very soft focus, fanged green Halloween mask, basically reaching out with green hands. And we've been watching a lot of Ink Masters lately, so I don't know if that's just making me feel extra mean because of the influence of the harshness of that show. But I think this is a terrible cover. I think this artwork is really bad. And I'm sorry if you're listening and you drew this, but it just looks like that meme, where people, I don't know if you've ever seen that meme where it's like, stop doing this shit to your photos, and it's a photo of Yoda. And then after the filter, he's been like, his skin has been smoothed to like a baby. That's what this Phantom looks like. It's just like a smooth nothingness.
Smooth Yoda.
Yeah, he just kind of looks like a smooth Yoda, like no character or personality whatsoever. And then just like kind of a flowing amorphous black nothingness for his robes. I think it's bad. What do you think?
I agree. Also, he's got just such a big chummy grin on his face. He's a little, yeah. I was like, is he going to be friendly?
He doesn't look so mean.
He's not so scary.
And it almost, spoilers, I guess, but from the very first paragraph that the Phantom shows up, I was like, oh, this is going to be one of those books where they do the Scooby-Doo thing where nothing is supernatural, it all is a rational explanation, and this is just a guy in a stupid Halloween mask trying to scare everybody away. And it turns out that's exactly what happens. And I wonder if I was influenced by this cover, even though it is drawn, it looks like a guy wearing a stupid Halloween mask.
Well, I will say one thing that threw me off a little bit. Well, here are some things. One, I thought you could never have a Phantom in a Jesus book because that doesn't exist, But
yeah, I was wondering about that.
Yeah. But then at one point they said, and then he gave me the biggest smile. So I was like, well, I guess it's not a mask because it sounds like his mouth is changing. Did you think anything about that?
Nope.
Okay. Well, that was the only part where I was like, well, I don't know now. I guess it's not a mask. I don't know what's going on with this thing.
Yeah, well, he also floats through the trees at one point. And then the dad is like, oh, it was just wires. I found them while I was out walking around looking at stuff.
Yeah, he connected wires all around our house so he could float up by your window. No big deal.
I at least thought that was going to be like a projection or something like they always used to do on Scooby-Doo.
Yeah. But alas, it was not.
Alrighty, well, so the plot of this book, I mean, I read it already and I don't think we need to go beat by beat, but basically, yeah, they set up pretty early on that Dad is an insurance investigator. I wrote this, I made a note of this because I thought this was a good, like, the way that you brag about your dad. When you're a kid, like, as an adult, you're like, that's not really such a big deal. But as a kid, you're like, my dad's the coolest dad in the whole world. Dad's an insurance investigator. Oh, Heather says, he's the best. One time he solved a case where the owner started a fire in his own house just to get the insurance money. And I'm like, doesn't every insurance investigate? Like, that's their job.
That is the job.
But I thought that was good in the sense that it felt like something a 13-year-old would say when they're like telling you about their dad. Like, my dad's so good at his job, he once caught a criminal who was arsoning their own house just for the money. I guess I don't need to go through every one of these notes that I made. The first. So, I don't know. They're on vacation in the mountains. Did they say where the mountains are?
No, I don't think so.
In the mountains. Oh, I wrote down. And then there's a wolf. There's a wolf chasing everybody around that winds up having nothing to do with anything. Although I guess there's some speculation that maybe the phantom let him out of a trap once or something.
Yeah, the deal with the wolf. Well, one, I think the wolf actually mauled a child at some point, but the child lived. And that's part of what shut down the camp in the first place. And then I guess they trapped the wolf, but then this dude that's wearing the phantom mask untrapped the wolf and brought it back to keep the camp closed down. So there is a real wolf and a dude in a phantom mask running around.
Yes.
So there is some real threat happening here.
Yeah, sure. They find this camp in the woods, and then they realize it was a Christian camp.
Yes.
Which
specific Christian camp made so children can hear about the Lord. That is repeated multiple times, and that's why it's an important camp.
That's why it's an important camp. But I wrote down that this book, let's see, what did I write down? Over the course of 4 chapters, there are 2 fake out endings. It winds up being 3 within the first 5. 2 of my family members are dead fake out endings. The first one was because Heather and Todd are tramping around in the woods, and then after Heather sees or maybe just hears the wolf, she runs to go find her brother, and he's like lying on the ground with, quote, blood all over him. And then he's like, haha, gotcha. And then to tie in with the last episode we did where we talked about how surprising it was to Jose that they name-checked McDonald's, he specifically says, I use these McDonald's ketchup packets to fool you with blood all over myself. Ha 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 ha. And then the other one was, the end of chapter 4 or 3 is Heather comes home to tell her parents what happened, and Dad is slumped over on the table, lifeless. He's dead. And then Mom comes in and is like, oh, he's took some cold medicine, and that made him pass out. And I wrote down, I'm surprised this book says medicine is okay. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, we were medicine people, so, I think there are different religions, and and our religion was okay with medicine.
Just to clarify, I was raised in even saying a religious household feels, that word to me is just like, that means a certain kind of thing. But we were church-going people. We were just Lutherans who were pretty relaxed about everything. So I didn't have any kind of censorship of what I could read or watch, or, we were not anti-medicine, anti-vaxxers, whatever, all the things that some religious people, but I think just I don't know. I think once you declare this is Christian media, my mind is like, oh, they must be wacko. Because I feel like people who go to a Lutheran church and are sane would just write a thing. And like if they have some kind of religious conviction, like they might be like a Terrence Malick about it and like insert that into the story, but not have it like take over and be like, this is how you must live your life. It's just like, this is a thing that's important to me. So I'll put it like M. Night Shyamalan. I'm listening to a podcast right now where they're watching all of M. Night Shyamalan's movies and talking about how religiosity comes up so much in his work. But he was a mainstream filmmaker. He never identified. So that's kind of what I think is like, if you're a sane religious person, you just make stuff. And if you're an insane religious person, you say, this is specifically, a crappy alternative to the thing your kid actually wants to watch or read. What else do you have to say?
Well, you were talking about the fake outs. I thought maybe I'm over exaggerating. Was it not every single chapter ended in a fake out? Because that is definitely how it felt. And I was like, oh my God, nothing's ever going to happen here. It's all going to be a fake out scare, Nothing happens. Because, we have the dead brother, not dead, bloody brother, ketchup brother, not dead dad, passed out dad, and everyone ends, of course, on a cliffhanger chapter. So then it picks up in the next chapter. Just kidding, dad had too much medicine, and then he eventually woke up off the table. It's just like absolutely ridiculous. Do you want to talk about the spider one at this moment?
The spider I don't specifically remember. Go ahead, you can say.
Okay, at one point, Heather fakes being bit by a spider.
Yes. Okay, yes. I thought you meant the specific instance where a spider like jumps on her head in the forest. But yes, I wrote down that this Rod Randall, old double R, even outdoes R.L. Stine in this book, because not only does he give us all these fake out cliffhangers, he gives us a fake out cliffhanger from Heather's point of view where she is the one faking everybody out. So I guess she's just lying to us, the audience. So it's at the end of a chapter after the spider fell on her head. Let me see if I can find it, because
it is the most ridiculous thing. And you're like, this one must be happening because she's definitely telling us it's happening, and it's from her that it's happening.
What happened to the camp, I said, and why does someone want to scare us away? Dad shrugged. It's hard to say. God knows, of course, but perhaps we never will. But maybe we can help solve some kind of mystery. I gobbled a big handful of popcorn and reached for another. I doubt it, Mom said. She got up and poured us all some punch. I like all the, you can't just say this person said something. It's like, I said that and also grabbed a handful of popcorn. Mom said that and got up to get us all some punch. It's a very active family. I think most of if a book is written about us, it's just like he said while sitting on the couch. She said while sitting on the couch. If only I had another comeback, but I didn't. For some reason, I was feeling lightheaded. I thought of the spider that had landed on my hair. Did it bite me before I shook it loose? I couldn't breathe. I started to choke. Everything looked blurry. The spider, I gasped. Help. What is it, Heather? Dad asked. My head was spinning. Air, please, I begged. My lungs felt like they were caving in. She's passing out, Mom shrieked. Dad squeezed my hand. By then, I was gone.
Bum, bum, bum.
Chapter 6. Heather, my dad pleaded, patting my back. Heather, what's wrong? Do something, Dad, Todd begged. Hurry, Mom cried out. That was enough for me. Fooled you, I said, laughing. Fuck you, Heather. Heather the feather.
It just doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense. I feel like the author was like, I'm gonna make her pass out, and then was like, too much. Jesus would never. It's gonna be a joke, but forgot it was from her perspective. It just made no sense. That fake out was the most frustrating fake out to me. Now I do see a little further down in your notes, you're discussing the dad's secret phone call.
Yes.
So at this point in the book, the dad is having, the daughter thinks that the Phantom is coming to the house. It's another fake out. Turns out it's dad downstairs on a secret phone call in the closet. It's definitely written in a way that we as adult readers of normal books would definitely think dad's having an affair. But this is not an adult book for normal readers. So clearly that's not what's happening. But there is no clearly this is what is happening. It's very confusing if you're reading this book. I have no idea what my little child, pure Christian heart mind would have thought, because all I thought at this point was dad's having an affair. I couldn't get out of my head. What did you think? Clearly that's what you thought too with your notes.
Well, I didn't think that was going to turn out to be the case.
Yeah.
It made me think of my problem with not even specifically Christian media, but with, I don't know, I guess I would say like family values type media. Like you mentioned the Disney Channel. I always felt like I didn't really watch the Disney Channel, at least their live action stuff, because I always felt like, and I didn't really have the tools to articulate this when I was 10 or 11, but my sister used to watch like Boy Meets World and Brotherly Love and like Growing Pains and stuff like that. And it always annoyed me because I was like, I understood on some level that these were shows that were purporting to talk about actual real world issues that teens faced, but they always did it in the most disingenuous way. So like, if there was an episode about like, I don't know, somebody wanted to try pot or something, then the solution to the problem would just be like, well, don't do it. Da 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 da. And it always annoyed me because I just sense like they want the credit for like being good, wholesome, clean television that's teaching kids how to live, but they're not teaching kids how to live because they're not willing to engage with the real world reasons that people actually do drugs or have premarital sex or, I don't know, are attracted to people of their same sex. Not that I think that's a problem, but somebody writing for that show might, or whatever. Like what do you do when you're at a party and everybody's drinking or whatever? It just always felt so patently false to me. So that's what this made me think of, was like, I would really respect if a Christian book was like actually dealing with what do you do when you find out your dad is having an affair? But I knew that wasn't going to be the case. So that's why I made that note.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it for sure was never going to happen. But isn't it in Saved by the Bell where is it Lisa that has the drug problem, but really it's just sleeping pills? Jesse. Yeah. Sleeping pills.
So excited. I'm so scared.
Yep.
Yeah.
Those hard-hitting issues. So
I'm assuming the point of the secret phone calls, because I think Heather brings it up to Mom later, and Mom's like, I have something to tell you, and then, Deus Ex Machina interrupts whatever her explanation would be. I'm assuming they're just supposed to be like work calls.
I assume so too, or like maybe he's talking to the police, because we find out he talked to the police about stuff going on at the camp. So I don't know if we ever got back to this, but the dad is there to, oh my God, the police situation. Oh my God. So the dad is there. We find out he took them on this family vacation, but it's also a work trip because he's there to figure out what's going on at this camp so that he can get the camp insurance money to reopen. But this Phantom is there and is scaring everyone away. Also, there's a wolf there that is scaring everyone away. And there happen to be fires that keep popping up. And so there's more and more damage to this camp and they can't rebuild it. So the dad is there to do his insurance stuff. And
which you don't find out until the end.
Yeah, that's a plot twist. The plot twist at the very end is that dad...
Shyamalan.
Yeah, because it does start out as, the typical, the parents don't believe the kids, because the kids go to the camp, they see the Phantom, they see the wolf, they come screaming back, they're like, oh my God, there's a Phantom, and the parents are like, okay, you just need to never go to that camp again, because Also, it's going to cave in on your head because it's in shambles. So we just figure the parents don't believe the kids. But as the story progresses, we find out the dad does believe something fishy is going on. Perhaps not a phantom because Jesus, but he does believe something questionable is going on, and he's investigating it. So behind the scenes, without wanting to tell his family, he's talking to the police. But why don't you talk to us about the police?
Well, first off, I want to say, going somewhat chronologically, Todd gets obsessed with laying out traps because he wants to catch the wolf. He has all kinds of traps, every single one of them. Well, I guess not every single one. To give Todd his credit, one of them finally works at the end. Chekhov's tree trap.
Well, he catches himself in the pit.
Yes, but I was going to say, before that, though, he makes all these different traps to try to capture the wolf because he's reading out of, like, survival books. Oh, I wrote down a quote that I thought was pretty funny. Todd is, at the beginning of the book, Todd is saying that he wants to build all these traps, and Heather's like, you don't know how, and he talks about this book that he has, and he says, I read part of the entire thing. I thought that was pretty funny, but then the author kills it by having Heather respond, you mean you looked at the pictures? Come on, Randall. Just let the joke be what it is. But he has some book where he's like probably some survival handbook or whatever that he's reading to set up all these traps. And then Dad gets caught in one at some point. Like one of the many times Dad wanders off and disappears is because he gets caught in one of those, where they have the lasso on the ground and then the person gets pulled up into the tree, which they do in that occurs a lot in children's media. I'm like, how do all these kids know how to make it? Seems fairly complicated. Like I understand I also don't understand the do you know how when people do the bucket on top of the door and then it just spills on people? I always wondered, how do they do that so that the entire bucket just doesn't fall on the person's head?
I have no idea. I was not a trap child, I don't know.
Well, that's more of a prank than a trap, but I'm always like, it must be like on a hinge or something to just dump the water without the buck. But they just make it seem like they just put it on, maybe just set it.
We can look it up later.
It doesn't answer my question at all. But anyway, so yeah, Dad gets caught in a trap, and then at one point Todd, the fat kid, is running, and he falls into like the hole that he made. I forget what kind of trap that was, but anyway, he twists his ankle like a useless little idiot. I don't remember what Heather is trying to convince her dad of at some point. Maybe it's going there to like make them all go to the camp to investigate what's going on or something. But I thought this was pretty funny. She says, in the course of trying to convince her dad, she's like, I reached for my Bible. But Dad, with God, all things are possible. Isn't that in here somewhere? I thought that was funny because it sounds like, I feel like there's a million jokes on The Simpsons where somebody will say something and like allege that it's from the Bible, and then somebody else will be like, which part? And they're like, I don't know, it's in there somewhere. And then, so Dad doesn't want to go with them to investigate this camp. So Todd and Heather go themselves, and then while they're there, the chapel catches on fire, and their plan to try to put out the fire is they find it's just burning and burning and burning, and they're looking around the campgrounds and they find a sleeping bag, and they get it sopping wet, and then they just like slap it up against the side of the chapel, and then they're like, that didn't work.
Crazy.
I thought that was pretty funny. I don't know if it was meant to be funny, but I thought it was pretty funny. But then eventually they do manage to put out the entire chapel with like 3 buckets of water, the aforementioned buckets of water.
Trash cans.
Oh, trash cans? Okay. But yeah, I just don't know how they got the roof out. I don't understand the logistics of that at all. But then the cops one cop shows up after they managed to get the fire out. A cop shows up, the sheriff, no less, comes, and I don't think he actually points his gun at them, but he is talking to them very severely because he clearly thinks they started the fire. He, shoves them up against some trees or whatever and frisks them and finds a book of matches in Todd's pocket. And Todd says, well, it's just common sense to carry matches in the woods because what if we get lost and we have to start a fire? And the sheriff handcuffs them and takes them back to the jailhouse, throws them in jail, and Todd is looking at the scratches on the wall and says, do you think these, like, you know, when people do like the tallies on the wall in like, I don't know, the Count of Monte Cristo or whatever. He's like, do you think each one of these represents a day? And the sheriff is like, those represent years, and that's how long you kids are going to be here. And at this point, I was like, okay, so clearly this guy's an asshole. I was not expecting ACAB from a Christian perspective. So I guess good on you, Rod Randall. And then I'll let you I've been talking for a while. You can say what happens next.
Okay. Is it in this story or did I dream this? They turn off the lights and cockroaches come out.
Yes, that is in this story.
My gosh. Also in this story before this happened. No, that's later. The rats. Is that this story? Later, yeah. My gosh. I was like, wait, was I reading adult books? No, this is. So the dude turns off the lights. These two children are in cells, clink, clink cells. He turns off the lights and they get covered in cockroaches to where the floor is moving with cockroaches. Disgusting. And he's like, well, I can't get a hold of your parents, so we're not going to go find them. Because the girl couldn't remember, you know, the home phone number for the cabin where they're visiting. So the cop was just like, screw y'all. Hope they figure out where you are sometime. ACAB for sure. But then the parents come in. Praise the Lord Jesus. I don't remember how they found out where they were. Must have been the Lord. They come in and the daughter's like, thank God. Now my dad's going to give this police officer a talking to. But then no, Dad thanks the kind police officer. Probably just like Jesus would.
Shakes his hand.
Shakes his hand. All ACAB is out the window. I guarantee Heather the Feather.
Heather is like showing him like the marks on her wrist. She's like rubbing her wrists like, aren't you going to yell at this guy? He put us in handcuffs.
I have cockroach bites on my face. But no, Daddy shakes the hand of this cop. But I guarantee Heather the Feather's going to grow up and she's going to be an ACAB. She's going to hate all the cops. I guarantee it after that traumatizing experience. So anyway, they get out. They get out at that time. Just like
that's what happened to Hitchcock. That was his origin story. Did you ever hear about that?
No.
Alfred Hitchcock, when he was a kid, I don't know if it's even, he said what he did. He committed some, childish infraction, and his father sent him to the police station with a note and said, hand this to the police officer. And then the police officer read the note and threw him in a cell. And then, 10 minutes later, whatever, came over and was like, all right, you're free to go, but this is what happens if you're bad. And so Alfred Hitchcock feared and hated cops for his entire life. And that's why he made all these innocent man on the run movies. And yeah, that'll happen to Heather the Feather. And also, there was something else I was going to say. Oh, because she says something like, well, why did the cop throw us in a cell? And the cop just brushes it off like, would you rather I let you stay in the woods? And then, Mom and Dad laugh. Ah, ha, ha. What a crazy knucklehead this police officer is.
And the answer is yes. Leave me in the woods.
That's why they went out there. It's because they were trying to figure out what was going on. They clearly wanted to be there. So then, I don't know. I feel like the end of the book is fairly boring. Oh, I made a note of at one point when the second time Dad disappears, there's a sentence where it says that Mom, they're straining to hear where their dad is, and she pulled back her hair to listen. And I thought that was word salad, but then I wanted to ask you, as a lady with long hair, do you ever have to get your hair out of your ears to listen?
Well, I have very thin hair, so no. But sometimes, because I have very tiny ears, I do have to hold them out like elephant ears to be able to hear. So perhaps if I had thick hair, I would have to do that. Thick mom hair. Maybe that's what it is. I, to be honest, had imagined her with short hair up until that moment. And then all of a sudden she had long, brown, thick triangle hair at that moment. So, yeah. I would definitely like to talk about these Jurassic Park references, though, that you have written down.
Go for it.
Okay, so we're getting to the end of the book. At this point, the dad has gone out to investigate on his own the camp because the Phantom has come and haunted outside of Heather and Todd's window. And the dad's like, you know what? Something is weird. Something's going on. I'm going to go outside and see what's going on because Heather at this point has now seen the wolf and the Phantom directly outside her window. I assume it's a 2-story window. Again, I assume it's just like the one in every scary movie, scary book. It's the I'm cold window. So she's looking out there, definitely on the 2nd story. The Phantom has floated up there. We find out later he has rigged a one-man concoction that he is able to fly himself up to the 2nd story window and scare these children. But anyway.
Probably borrowed it from the Passion Play or something they do at the local church where they needed Jesus to rise up above the congregation or whatever.
Yeah, and Jesus rises himself, just pulley style, raising himself. Anyway, yes. The wolf helped him. Anyway, so Dad has now gone outside and is going to the camp to investigate by himself. But then he's gone too long, and Heather decides she needs to go as well. So she's running over there super fast, lightning fast. She's so fast because she's light as a feather and the Lord made her that way. And the wolf starts chasing her. This is a real wolf, we do find out. So that is kind of scary. And the wolf chases her like in and out of all these buildings. At one point, she's in a cabin and she's on these bunk beds and she is attacked by what sounds like hundreds of rats. They just are coming up on the bunk bed. They are squeaking all around her. They're coming from above. They're coming from below. This is nightmare juice. There's a movie about rats in a basement and some guy that, like, I don't know. Willard. That's the vision I had. Ugh, disgusting. So eventually she climbs out a window. At that point, the wolf had been blocked out from the door. It's out front. The rats are inside. She climbs out a window at the back. And then she goes in another one. And now here's where we get a little Jurassic Parky. She is in the mess hall.
Well, first I want to say, after the rat incident, she makes a flippant remark where she says, "What's next? Raptors with revolvers?"
Yeah. Yeah.
I feel like nobody used the word raptor until Jurassic Park came out, so I was like, that's clearly on this guy's mind.
100%. And it was 100% on his mind when she's like, I'm going to run into the kitchen away from this wolf, because she runs into the mess hall, closes the door. Of course, the wolf runs in through the window, at which point she's like...
I think it like crashes through the window.
Yeah, it crashes through the window.
Yeah, which is a cool visual.
It is a cool visual. Such a cool visual that she's like, for a moment, I thought I should stare in awe because it was so magnificent. The wolf crashing through all the glass. But then I remembered I should run.
Yeah. That's like the children's book equivalent of like heroines in like YA books who are like, I think this man murdered my sister, but I'm admiring his lips. I just want him to kiss me.
That's exactly right. She, for a split second, was in love with the wolf, but then she remembered the wolf is bad. So she ran into the kitchen where the wolf is chasing her. She can hear its talons on the tiles. Clink, clink, clink. I think we know what that is.
They're just called claws.
Well, today they're called talons because they're reminding us of raptors. And then she's like, whoa, what's that? A walk-in freezer? Walk-in freezers have really thick doors, and it'll never be able to get out of there. If I go in there and bait it just like my brother baits things in his traps, then the wolf will come in and chase me, and then I can lock it in there. And so then, of course, she runs in there. The wolf skids in there, gets locked in. She jumps out, locks it in there. But guess what? Does it stay in there? Absolutely not. It does not. It gets out of there. We don't know how. We think it's probably the phantom. I think it's probably the wolf talons. But we don't know. Something lets the wolf out. So there's more wolf chasing and stuff like that. But definitely Jurassic Park is what's happening there. I could not picture. I was like, is she going to crawl into something echoey that's like dunk dunk, and try to close a thing under the thing? Is she going to drop some spoons? You know how they like bump up against the back of the thing?
It's more of a ladle.
Ladle. I was trying to think of the word ladle and I couldn't get it, So
there were a lot of words you couldn't think of just then.
I didn't need them. Everyone knows.
Crawl into something echoey and bump, bump, bump. And
Everyone knows exactly what I'm saying throughout that entire thing. Then they can go eat some shaky Jello. All this is real. Actually, shaky Jello comes first, but she didn't have time for that because she was admiring the wolf. So anyway, blah, blah, blah. Her brother comes out. Oh, finally she's like, I have the perfect escape. There's a chain link fence. It'll never get me. She runs towards the chain link fence, back outside. I don't know. And then she sees her wobbly little brother come out of the woods, sprained ankle. He's made it all the way to camp. And she's like, no, he's going to be eaten. He's so stout and wobbly. And now he has a sprained ankle. He's going to be even slower than ever. But the wolf chases him. She's like, hope he got up a tree. Bummer, man. Then she realizes she can hear the swoosh of a tree. And the wolf has been trapped by Pudge Brothers' tree trap. So that's good.
yes, indeed. Yep. And then she goes, is it the chapel that was on fire that she goes into?
Yeah, I think just like a corner of it got burned.
Okay.
They saved it.
Yeah, they took their sweet time putting it out, but it didn't really do a lot. This phantom arsonist doesn't seem to know how to start a fire very well.
Yeah.
As evidenced by the fact that he had months to do all this and was just sort of like puttering around, putting up rigging to lift
He had to get his costume together. Okay. It was about the fit, babe.
his Halloween mask and Halloween Party City robe.
Off season.
They even say when they unmask him, I think Heather even describes the mask as like, oh, it was just a cheap Halloween mask.
Yep.
I think you would have noticed that a little bit earlier when you pulled it off his face.
Yeah, like getting up close to him. You don't have to pull a mask off to realize it's a cheap mask, but I guess they did have to do that.
Yeah, because you said the thing about phantoms don't exist in. Well, first of all, they say at some point they say like it could be a ghost or even a phantom, which I always thought was an interchangeable term. I wonder if there's some kind of a difference between a phantom and a ghost. But I was curious though that it never does come up like, but we are Christian. We don't believe in. Not that I haven't known people who are very Christian and also very ghost believing in.
I feel like it said somewhere, like, I feel like the dad said something along the lines of course it's not a phantom. And I do think, as far as ghosts for sure, that's not generally a Christian belief because those would be demons. So you can believe in demons. And maybe they're saying phantoms and demons would be the same thing. I don't know. But definitely not ghosts.
Like maybe they just didn't want to.
Maybe they didn't want to use the word demon. Yeah, maybe demon's too scary.
Maybe.
But I don't know the difference really with a phantom and a ghost. In my mind, that is the same thing. Yeah. And in my mind, ghosts are not part of the Christian world.
I mean, yeah, I thought that would be addressed. But there's not a lot of tension in this book because pretty early on, Heather says something like, nothing bad can happen to me if God's watching over me. And you're like, oh, okay, well, I guess there's not going to be any suspense here then. Guess who's on my side? The guy who rules the universe. Guess who's on your side, Phantom? Party City. And that's it.
And your cheap matches.
Oh, and also the walk-in freezer, the power's been out. So there's no coldness in there.
Well, it wasn't a point of the coldness. It was a point of the door latching.
I know, but I just still feel like that scene in Jurassic Park would be visually much less interesting if if there was just a big walk-in freezer that was just another room. Yeah. Because you got to see like the raptor like slipping on the ice, and then the kid slipping on the ice as he tries to run out.
Definitely slipping in my mind.
Yeah, but that's not really possible unless it's through the grace of God, which we may also see another example of before this book is over. But anyway, Heather goes and finds her dad tied up and gagged on like a pew or whatever. And she gets him not untied, but she gets the gag out, and he tells her the whole thing about like, we're not here just for a family vacation. I came up here to investigate because of all the spontaneously combusting buildings in this old abandoned camp. But I didn't really think it was going to be that big of a deal because it's just like a pretty routine thing that I investigate in my job. So I also thought that I could turn it into just a family trip, and I could do my work here and also spend time with my family. I didn't know that this guy who's setting everything on fire was going to try to murder us all and also run around in a crappy Halloween costume. But then they hear the Phantom approaching again, and Dad says, you got to go hide somewhere. And she doesn't have time to leave, I guess. So she climbs up to the ceiling, I guess.
Open rafters.
Yeah, and she's like, thanks to my skinny ass, I can hide on this beam, and the Phantom won't see me. And then the Phantom comes in. He's all like, where's your daughter? He does like the most half-hearted glance around the chapel with his flashlight, and then just like, oh, I guess she's not here. Honestly, I think she would have been okay even if she had been sticking out from behind. The Phantom did not seem very thorough in his investigation.
She probably could have hid under the pew where her dad was tied up,
Or just like did that thing where you freeze in place and people think you're a statue.
I'm an angel.
And then the Phantom is like gonna beat up her dad or brain him or something, and she comes up from behind with a flashlight, I think, and knocks him about the head. And I think she does get the dad untied, and he's just pretending to be untied.
Yeah, I think he got loose. So then the Phantom and the dad are fighting, and the Phantom is clearly winning, and she's like, "Oh no, I can't let the Phantom win." And he's about to like bash over the dad with a chair, bash over his head with a chair. So then she comes falling down from the rafters with a flashlight.
It'd be rough to lose a fight in front of your daughter.
Yeah.
She'll never respect me again, especially with our conservative gender roles.
He's going to have to live with the fact that his girl daughter saved him.
I know. His tiny, skinny, featherweight daughter had to save him from this old-ass hardware store running guy dressing up as a Phantom. And then there's like, they unmask him, and there's it's some guy that we saw in one scene earlier who's like running the hardware store, where Todd somehow contrives to fall on the floor under a shelf that has a bunch of axes just sitting on it with no like plastic covers over them and then like Heather runs in, and instead of just getting up, he's like, help. So Heather runs in to help him and sees like an axe is poised over his head, like about to fall off this shelf. And I think he still winds up just like rolling over or something so it doesn't cleave his skull in twain. But it's like, why didn't you do that 30 seconds ago instead of just going, oh no, help me. And then they like say something to the hardware store guy like, that doesn't really seem like a very safe way to arrange your axes, just like willy-nilly scattered all over a rotted shelf that's going to fall at any moment with nothing covering up their blades. And he's like, this isn't a toy store. I did not suspect that he was going to be the ultimate criminal. I guess I should have known because he was such a nasty jerk.
Yeah, I didn't expect it either, though. I thought he was just gone after that.
So then our favorite character, the sheriff, shows up. Once again, cops showing up after all the danger has been averted. Like, I'm here to save everybody. Like, fuck you. You stayed far, far away until everything was taken care of.
Yeah, they called this guy. They called the cops back when the Phantom arrived at the window way back at the house. So ages ago, before the rats, before the velociraptors, before any traps with wolves, before any of that, they called the cops. And now that it's all over and they have captured the Phantom and unmasked him, now the cop comes in, guns a-blazing.
Yeah.
Nobody move.
All right, and then there's a moment where he's like pointing his gun at like a noise in the trees or bushes or something, and then Mom and Todd come ambling out, and I was like, ugh, good thing they're white.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. He's pointing the gun at the bushes, and then they come walking out. I was like, this is gonna end. This would not end this way if this were IRL. You know what I'm saying?
Although when the kids were getting handcuffed, I was like, I wonder if this is like secretly a black family.
Yeah. Well,
Until the part where we realized, oh no, we're supposed to endorse that this sheriff is terrifying these children for discipline, I guess.
at first, when the dad shook we're going back to that, kids in the clank time. When the dad shook their hand, I thought, in jail. Isn't that what they call it?
That's what secular people call it.
When the dad shook the cop's hand, I thought the parents had set this up because they had originally told the kids not to go back to the camp. So I was like, oh, the parents set it up so the kids would be arrested to scare them. And that just was not the case at all. They just were like pro bad cop.
Yep. And then do you want to talk about the divinity on display at the end of this book?
Yeah. So it really does come to a miracle moment here at the end. So, there's all these Jesus, to be honest, isn't really mentioned, but God has really worked out how everyone is created for each of these moments. And what you don't know is that at the middle of this camp, there's been a lamppost, which has brought the kids to this camp. It's lit the way to this camp. It's been lit this whole time. And it's just a real focal point of the story and of the camp. Oh, and then I'm going to back up just a little bit here. So I'm going to read just this part. This is the sheriff talking. I imagine Fish and Game will take him back, talking about the wolf, to wilderness where he belongs, the sheriff told me, far from civilization and this Christian camp. And then Heather's talking. Hearing the word Christian reminded me of why the camp was built in the first place. Looking around at the cabins and buildings and finally the chapel, I prayed that with the Phantom and the wolf out of the way, the camp would reopen soon and the kids would come to learn about God just like they used to. I walked to the center of the camp and stood under the lamppost, thankful to have had such a bright light when I needed it most. Blah, 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 moving down. I don't believe it, the sheriff confessed. He continued to watch the lamp, mystified. What? We all wondered. What is it? Tell us. The sheriff shrugged and filled us in. There's no electricity at this camp. The power was shut off months ago. Now that's a miracle, Todd gasped. With broad smiles on our faces, we all stared at the light above us. Then I noticed a plaque at the base of the post with a verse inscribed in it. Without hesitating, I read it for everyone. When Jesus spoke again to the people, he said, I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. John 8:12. Amen to that, the sheriff agreed, still watching the lamp. Amen to that. So maybe it does get a little hard hitting there at the end.
Yeah. But that's not... Honestly, though, that ending is not that much crazier than a lot of secular media that needs to do I feel like there's just a lot of Christmas episodes of not non-explicitly Christian shows that will do something of that order. Like,
It's very Lifetime.
yeah. So even that, I was like, it could be more heavy-handed than this. So I guess I'll let Jesus be a street lamp.
Yeah, they didn't try to convert the guy that was like had been the Phantom or anything like that.
Oh, do you think they should have? Wasn't that their duty as Christians?
100% they should have.
And the whole thing is he's trying to scare everybody away and burn everything down because he was like buying subpar quality materials and then selling it to this camp. So everything was just shitty and falling apart. Unfortunately, none of the children got hurt. Neither by...
Jesus saved them.
Yeah, and I would say that's what I object most to in this book is just this idea of like there are repeated references to like I was like at one point Heather has to jump from her bedroom window? She has to jump from like the ledge. She gets out of her bedroom window and onto the ledge because the Phantom is I think it's one of the cabins at the camp. Yeah. And she has to like jump onto this tree, but the branches are so thin that she's not sure it'll support her weight. And she's like, I think the Lord will look out for me. And she makes the jump and like, oh, the branch cracked, but it didn't break. And then the Phantom gets all frustrated and runs off. But there's just a lot of moments like that where she's like, Jesus is truly looking out for me. And I just always hate that kind of, I don't know, like it's hard for me to be heartwarmed by that because I'm like, okay, so all the kids in the world who are suffering and dying are just bad. Like God is not helping them for some reason. Like if you want to do the Lord works in mysterious ways thing, it's like, at least that's not putting blame on anybody. Like what about children who get, childhood cancer and die? Why is God not looking out for them? But like, oh, I better make sure Heather makes this jump.
Yep. And I'll tell you, as a kid, I would have been a very Heather person. Even though I wouldn't say I had an easy childhood or anything like that, but I was definitely like, oh, thank you, Jesus. And I don't know, like, I don't know what I'm trying to say there, but I hear you. I am on your side. I don't love those parts. I don't know what to say about it. That's what I'm going to say.
All right. Is that a thing that makes you feel like special when you're a kid? Like to say, oh, he's looking out for me?
I don't know if it's special, but it makes you have it was a security, I think, for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was just wondering, because, all kids want to feel special. So I was like, is that a thing where it's like the Lord's looking out for me and that means I'm really great? Or is it just like because my parents were smart enough to educate me in the ways of Christianity or something?
No, I never felt like it was like I'm watched out for and others aren't, or I'm special, therefore I'm watched out for. It was just like in my life, it just felt like a fact, like God is watching out for me, period. And there's still some of me that is still has a little of that part, And it doesn't necessarily mean all good things will happen at all. So I think that's where my issue lies is like, well, she will always be safe. All good things will happen. She won't be eaten by a wolf. She will not fall out of a tree even if she jumps to the highest height. Like she can make all the worst choices and everything will be fine. Like I think that's that's a lie. A lie that young or any Christian really can be told, and many can believe, and that I've probably believed or tried to believe at some points. Like I can believe God is watching out for me, but not all good things will happen to me. So I don't know if that makes sense, but nope. Yeah, it doesn't have to make sense. So I'm still deconstructing my own stuff,
So leaving aside the Christian element, How did you feel about this book as a story?
Well, I got through it. I found it so annoying though. Those cliffhanger chapters, to be honest, I just found them so annoying. So I don't think I would recommend it. I would definitely like to read a different one.
A different Heebie-Jeebies or just a different book?
Probably a different book. I can't imagine this author being one that gets better. But hey, we could try another Heebie-Jeebie.
Did you read the preview at the end of the book for the upcoming book in the series? No. Do you want to go ahead and look at it now? Yeah. And get your reaction in real time? I'm curious about all the different lessons that we are going to be learning in these Heebie-Jeebies books, because the plots do not especially seem to lend themselves to religious discussion.
Yeah. The rat that ate poodles.
Yep, book number 3 in the Heebie-Jeebies series.
Am I reading all this?
No, I just wanted to get you to look at I think there's a image of the cover somewhere. Flip, flip, flip.
Oh my goodness. Oh, that cover does look inviting, actually. I am very curious about the cover. So The Rat That Ate Poodles cover is a child in bed, terrified, with their blanket pulled up. And then what looks more like a bat, but I guess is a rat, a giant bat rat, coming through the wall. And this one does actually look pretty evil. Big teeth, big claws, angry eyes, big old snout. Also, I thought Poodles was a dog, but maybe Poodles is this child. I'm not seeing a dog.
You think the kid's name is Poodles?
I mean, who knows?
I guess I was assuming it was multiple dogs, like he's going around the neighborhood. But also I would be very surprised if they permanently killed pets in a children's series. So I'm assuming it's a title that lies.
I'm assuming there's one dog named Poodles.
So wait, would somebody name their dog that is a poodle Poodles?
I guess.
That's a stupid name. I hope that's not what it is, because I think that's dumb. And I think you're dumb for saying it.
Here, I can read the back of the book for that one. Even though it's a spoiler alert, if we do read it, you'll hear it again. Daniel Larkin is cleaning out the garage when he spills some mysterious bottles from his dad's old chemistry set. He intends to hide the evidence and keep his mouth shut, but that becomes more difficult when a giant mutant rat grows from out of the chemicals. Daniel is terrified by the giant, red-eyed, pink-tailed, dog-eating rodent and plagued by his own guilty conscience in this fun, creepy, and ultimately uplifting story of a kid who learns that covering up a big mistake can be the biggest mistake of all.
Yeah, I mean,
answer our Poodles question.
that sounds like a lesson that you could learn in any children's book. So it's the kind of lesson I endorse.
Yeah.
Not sure how much I endorse the God made me skinny because, man, all the tribulations, how many skinny children do you think were helped out of a body dysmorphia crisis by this book telling them, don't worry, there's a reason you're not a big fat fatty.
I hope lots.
Skinny people are definitely the ones who need to be the most self-conscious about their bodies.
Well, it's my understanding as I become older and a woman, it's my understanding that all body types are self-conscious in some way. So.
I don't doubt that I'm not saying that nobody who is not fat has complexes. I'm just saying that, it's a very selective thing. You're really stacking the odds in your favor to be I want to tell a story about how you shouldn't be self-conscious of your body type because God made you that way and you're beautiful. So what perceived flaw am I going to give to this main character? Well, she's just too skinny and light.
Yeah, and we never addressed the pudgy brother. He's just pudgy.
That's what I'm saying is he couldn't come up with a way to sell that moral if the character was chunky as I was as a child. Yeah. It's just a very selective, again, part of my problem with family values media is that they don't really address things, It's sort of we'll address what we can address and just pretend the rest doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Do you have any final? I've complained enough about you and all of your precious Jesus loving media. Do you have any final thoughts?
I want to be clear. I do not generally like Jesus loving media. I love Jesus, not the media. No, I don't think I have any parting thoughts. You should go check out that other podcast that we mentioned before.
Teen Creeps.
Yes. Teen Creeps.
After the something.
after the Rapture Party. I'm just confirming that is correct before I leave off. But they're really funny. They also have I think it's the same people, Sinful Sticker Club. So go check them out. I'm just going to endorse everything that they are.
Okay, that's enough shilling for other people. Like us, rate our stuff somewhere positively. Say that you like me better than you like Jose. Email us if you have any. I don't know. I guess I offended you with all of my anti-Christian talk here, email us at blackmagictreehousepod@gmail.com. Instagram, Black Magic Treehouse Pod. We have a Facebook group that you can probably find if you just look for Black Magic Treehouse Podcast, where we talk about, I don't know, the types of things that we talk about on this podcast. Is there any other house cleaning that we need to do? I feel like that's what we say at the end of the episode. Rest in peace, Jose.